Hello and welcome to Leadership Within. I'm your host Vanessa and I'm joined by...
your regular co-host TK. Hello.
Hello, you sound very joyful on this hot, sticky day.
Well, that's quite true. It's, the benefits of hindsight and, well, maybe foresight and investing in air conditioning 2 years ago. So, yes, I'm not bragging, but I'm saying foresight pays.
I think a lot of people might have a little bit of envy for you.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't be saying that. But, it's interesting how, in Europe, people are feeling guilty about that. But maybe that's a topic for another episode.
Yeah. Well, so talking about topics, I wanted to talk about this idea of change being kind of accelerated to the point where it's really challenging for leaders to kind of find their grounding and to keep up. And the reason I wanted to talk about it was I was talking with someone else on their podcast about it. And at the end of the conversation, I was left feeling like, well, is the pace of change different? Or is this a narrative that we're telling ourselves? And in telling ourselves that actually it's almost setting us up for anxiety and for a challenge in the way that we meet the ongoing evolution. So I was curious to get your opinion on this.
Well, I don't want to sell it short, but in my mind, it's actually not that bad. I think, it's like these headlines in the tabloids, big and scary and bold. But in fact, there's been wars, pandemics, inventions of various kinds, great migrations, tragedies happening, and so on. And I think, nowadays we have it pretty good. I think, all these things that are happening in the world, there always were tragic things, and there was always some kind of change. But I don't personally believe accelerating. I just think, that the doom and gloom is just something that sells the headlines.
Yeah, interesting. So the other piece to this, I suppose, is so the pace of change is one thing, but I suppose there's also this, and we've talked about it a couple of times, haven't we, that the narrative around AI, the future of work, and that seems to ramp up this idea of, change is afoot and we have no clue what it's going to look like on the other side of it. So does that impact you in your world, in your leadership at the moment, or not?
It does in a very positive manner. I'm keen to meet someone to actually. I know that some people might have been laid off, but for the majority of us, when it comes to this technological revolution, like any revolution in terms of technology that precedes it, it increases our productivity. It helps us to do more. It's a bit of an economic bubble, dare I say, but on the other hand, it's not that it helps me with my leadership or self-reflection, but it is a really handy tool. And I myself feel more productive. One would say that, maybe it took away some of my creativity, some of my attention to, doing slide decks or writing stuff that I had before. But on the other hand, I don't feel like it has a huge impact other than the invention of the phone, the internet, the personal computer. It's just another thing. I just don't think we absolutely need to complain. But the question is, what does this particular change feel like for you, Vanessa?
Well, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think for me, it's not necessarily the change that feels scary. I mean, there's a big narrative in the coaching industry around a lot of coaching, particularly performance coaching, can be done, with AI, which in many ways is great because,
absolutely.
Okay, so the boring side of coaching can be rinse and repeat with AI, but then the transformative, the emotional connection, the empathy, all those things, they can't be replicated by AI yet in the way that I think a human can. But I suppose, the biggest impact that I see is more just this feeling of being around a lot more anxiety, a lot more pressure, a lot more, oh my God, like kind of moments. So in the teams or the organizations that I get to meet through the work that I'm doing, I notice just this feeling of tightness, of we can't stop, we have to keep going, we need to squeeze more cost out. And I was curious, I suppose, about, because you casually mentioned in your previous comment about the economic side.
Yes.
And I'm kind of, we haven't said anything about that, and I'd love to hear what you think that is, like the economic bubble.
Well, when it comes to that, I believe that currently, the world, dare I say, is overinvested in this particular technology. I mean, okay, fine, I'm saying what I'm saying, which obviously, like if you look at these wonderful tools, and how much we're paying for them, or even using them for free, it's ridiculous. Like, this kind of service should be much more expensive, and it is actually consuming a lot of energy and computing resources that are obviously jacking up the prices for everything else. And there's this whole economic bubble cycle of like millions, billions, trillions. I don't know what the unit is now for dollars at this particular time. Which obviously this is how late stage capitalism works, I guess. But for me, it's like everyone's betting on it economically. And yet, I think because of this, I guess it's like the foresight or the expectation that it will completely change everything, revolutionize everything in a way that we can't really tell. People are anxious. But in my mind, we can never tell what will happen in the future. God knows, there can be another pandemic, flood, or, an abundance of something, the invention of free energy in terms of fusion, aliens maybe coming to us being, these beneficial. Actually, you can't tell. And, you never could. There are always inventions, changes, the fate, the universe is giving us all kinds of things. And, maybe our usual cortisol, whatever addiction, is causing us to find ways to, worry. It's always been the case.
I love that. Right. So I'm going to say that again, because you just kind of said it very quickly, but the cortisol addiction is finding ways for us to kind of worry. I think that's so true, isn't it? Because I don't know why we get into that worrying state. But I do see that a lot in leadership at the moment, and it doesn't necessarily show up as a worry, like an obvious worry, but you can feel the tension and you can feel that the direction of travel is what if, where should we? And
aren't we addicted to it
grounded.
as humans, I guess? I think, when you look at the drama triangle, transaction analysis, my feeling is, and, I'm observing it more and more, that, it can't just be smooth sailing. I don't know if it's like in the Matrix movie, we're not designed to live in a paradise. There always has to be something.
Yeah, and you talking about drama. So I'm doing a course with Coaches Rising at the moment. I'm really enjoying. And it has the conscious leadership group running sessions at the moment. And so they talk about, they use the drama triangle a lot in their work. And they also talk about being, whether as a leader we're above the line or we're below the line. And, if we are aware of that, so above being, we're open, curious, below being we're judgmental, closed. And I suppose the thing that I am getting from the program is just this reassurance that the practices that we need in leadership to really find our feet on the ground, to really slow down and do proper thinking, to know when we're reacting and not, that is the thing that's being really called forth with this kind of narrative that's around. And I suppose the thing that I really find reassuring about that is just, it's not that the work is new to me, but it's just like, oh, it's really great to hear someone else saying it in a way that is packaged really well, that says, as leaders, we really need to know where our attention is, where our, energy, mood is, and actually be able to come back to, well, what I would call regulation, they would call above the line. They're not saying it's wrong to be below the line. They're just saying, just noticing it, that's, and accepting it, and then you can move through it.
Well, that's true in so many models, right? In my mind, and I think this notion of self-regulation and the difficulty of it, I guess, the one vector that's constantly going up is our overstimulation with everything that happens, right? Change is constant, but as in physics, if you accelerate, even with the constant pace, your speed increases up to and including the speed of light, which you can never reach. But the thing is, life accelerates, work accelerates. There's so much, and it's difficult to cope. And it's not only about, overwork, working long hours and such, but with all this mental strain, self-regulation and finding this balance is getting more and more difficult. Whatever the change might be it, some tragedy or positive thing, it's always disruption. It's always unsettling in a certain way. And if we don't trust ourselves or have anyone to fall back on that can reassure us, well, there we are. Anxiety is rampant.
Well, and you use the word reassurance,
yes.
and you're making me think, because I was saying to you before we jumped on the call, I had a conversation with my yoga mentor, and he was talking about this idea of change, and he basically said, Vanessa, change is always constant. Changing seasons. Like, just look around you. Change is inevitable. It's part of life, and I think sometimes what I notice is if a leader is being affected at the effect of change, then it's very hard for them to have the capacity to reassure, or even worse, they feel that they need to reassure someone when actually you can't give a reassurance. So, like, what's your experience of that? Where, as a leader, you feel like people need reassurance, but actually you can't tell them it's going to be okay.
It's quite serendipitous and timely to the conversations I was having today, and actually a message to one of my clients that I work with about the fact that, in a change program, we probably need to be upfront with people and tell them that, well, we require more attention and work from them. Even though they are overworked, to facilitate a particular process. And what I wanted to say is, I think being honest and upfront, right? The truth will save us all. I guess that's the only thing I can. Being authentic, honest, and straight with people is the best I can do. And I've always, done my best to use this particular, dare I say, technique, and it has never let me down. Even though, okay, fine, it let me down multiple times, exiting me from various organizations because I'm being too honest. But there I go, here we are. It actually is a dangerous tool, to be honest.
Well, no, I mean, it's that courageous authenticity, isn't it?
Yeah, it gets boring a bit when, you're getting sacked left and right, but it definitely requires, you're right, yeah, that's how it's called. I forgot this particular name.
And I'm
maybe I need
wondering,
to introduce myself to it.
You jokingly say about being sacked, but is that your experience? Like, if you're going to speak a truth, that is a consequence that's going to happen.
You see, Vanessa, I don't know about your experience, but if you are inclined to authenticity and you stand by your values in a particular environment that's maybe against your core values, you tend to get frustrated. Yeah. And you lose your self-regulation, lashing out with, honesty and courageous authenticity that might not be productive. There were times which, yeah, absolutely, right. In an unskillful way. I'm not saying, it wasn't one nasty comment, but it adds up, I guess, over time, right? Being, bitter, cynical and such, which, I can't sometimes have a tendency to be. Because if you are in a environment that's really poisoning you from the inside and, you feel like you've got no way of venting it other than through cynicism or these kinds of behaviors, well, it gets quite unproductive and toxic. At least that's my experience. I'm hoping, Vanessa, that you are in better environments than I am.
No, I've
You've
I've
been
certainly
there.
been in those environments. I
Yeah.
certainly, I
But then this
recognise
is
what you're
something that
saying.
doesn't change, right? But one thing that we can be open and transparent about change, like that, for instance, worked with a client that the actual company was going through economic turmoil, and I think a couple of times a week, they've sent us like news snippets, right? It was nothing about the economic turmoil that the company was going through. It was like about everything else. And even the papers were writing that this particular company is facing layoffs and so on, and it's in the news. But, it was definitely not something that was talked about. And that's something that I think is an example of, it's just like hypocrisy.
Unfortunately, that exists in
It
a number
always
of
will.
places.
Something
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
change, right?
But if we were to say, okay, as a leader, what is a helpful way to think about your relationship to change that will really support you and the people around you?
Well, I've got a controversial one, which is admit that you're afraid. Huh. What a liberating thought. It's like, say, look, right, there's this happening. I am scared too. It's not that I know what's going to happen. No one, I think, knows, at least in this vicinity. And it's okay to be afraid, right? It's a human thing. Let's just support each other. I think it's a wonderful strategy not to, show reassurance through honesty, directness, and not hiding the fact that you might not have the answers, but you've got people's back.
Yeah. You're making me think. I remember a conversation with someone who was a leader in an organization. He said the best leader he worked for really showed him how to do this well. He was saying that they're in a really difficult spot, and he just felt that his boss came down, was really in it with them and just said, yeah, it's shit. I don't have all the answers here. We don't know. And, we're going to do our best to figure it out together, and it's like, there's something, isn't there, in it's like this.
Camaraderie,
in the
right?
truth telling.
Reassurance.
Yeah,
Course,
in the truth telling of it. But whereas, there's often times where, for whatever reason, we just feel like we shouldn't. So, like we should show a front, we should show something different, we should paint it a particular way. And it's funny because you said about news and it made me like news snippets, and it made me think, I don't watch the news. Like rarely do I watch the news because I just think
it is difficult nowadays. Yes.
yeah, and it's like, what is actual news? Like, where do I know that I'm getting or an informed perspective on things? So,
it's another kind of worms, right? It just also shows the pace of change, and it's only going to get, different. I'm not saying worse or better. It's just like, holy moly. But then again, it's also an opportunity for us to switch off, right? To maybe say, hey, look, I'm oversaturated as I am. Why do I need this in my life?
Yeah. Well, so I think the thing that I'm kind of sensing and experiencing is, at the moment, as soon as I hear that, oh my God, the pace of change is so, it's so much, and our people are just really burnt out and la la la. That's almost the moment for me to stop and like pause and not get contaged by it.
Oh, yeah,
to like just really
right?
ground and just go, okay, so that's a narrative that's being said. I'm not here to say whether that's true or not true. And the point is, how is that serving, whatever's got to be done? So when you said, saying to someone, we need more from you, despite the fact that you're already overworked.
Yeah. No, it's like, and there is little choice, by which I mean zero choice. And, also being honest that I wasn't offered a choice. And unfortunately, I can't give it to you either. Right. And I think
Right.
this particular look, right. I want your trust that I'm going to make it as best as I can and not waste your time and precious effort. But more will be needed. And it's like, I think, I don't know. I can't see myself hiding it from people, selling them something else. It's just not going to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's the dangerous truth. And, I'm going to have a conversation about revealing this or having this conversation tomorrow. And there's going to be pushback because people love to, paint the grass green. And I'm not the sort.
Mm. Well, and I'm hearing so much in that part of the conversation, your value set. You know what that is. You know where your boundaries are around that. You're oriented towards that. And I think that's the invitation that we would give any leader, to really know what you're standing for.
I guess so. It's just like, and also being afraid of saying that is okay. I think, it's just knowing yourself, forgiving yourself. I forgive myself for the anger I feel, seeing hypocrisy, seeing, certain individuals that, exhibit a different point of view that I have regarding this, right? It's fine. It's fine to be angry, but it doesn't have to be unproductive. It doesn't have to be unskillful. It's just, know yourself, I guess, right? Easy to say
also,
if...
I was going to say in the forgiveness, what you're letting it do is flow through you, isn't it? You're not like holding it on, putting it underneath, and then, it keeps bobbing up. You're just kind of like, okay, yeah, there's a part of me that feels angry towards this, feels frustrated, and I can accept that part of me.
And I guess that's the gist of it, right? In any circumstance, any change, or rapid or not, accelerating, decelerating, God knows, right? Even decelerating change is accelerating by its own means. You're there and you are yourself. And if you can adapt the situation that you have through understanding yourself, your own state, nothing really matters.
I love that, and it feels like a perfect moment for us to complete. Thanks for listening.